So we move on to the main event of the show, which is any excuse to talk about one of the best horror films of all time. Gonna take it.
Yeah.
Which is The Thing, directed by John Carpenter, or we're talking about Lee Cronin, so it's John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So before we talk about the movie itself, as we are joined by someone who has had multiple conversations with John Carpenter.
Yes.
I didn't know that. I hope you did, but yeah, cool.
Awesome.
Very lucky.
Were you nervous when you met him?
Little bit. Also because he's got a bit of a reputation for being a little bit grumpy.
Yeah. So I was going to ask
So,
about this, actually. So
I think over the years, because he's been burnt so many times in the film industry by studios and stuff, and he obviously kind of had enough and packed it in quite early. He could have gone on to do more movies, and I think he just thought, fuck this, I can't be bothered, and seemed to be more interested in his music and stuff. But he has a reputation for being a bit grumpy, and I wouldn't say he's grumpy, but he always starts off, like I said, I've done him about 4 times, and he always starts off a little bit short, not in terms of being rude, but he just doesn't give expansive answers. You ask him something and he'll give you the bare minimum. He'll give you a line or two in response, but he does warm up. If you engage with him and you clearly sort of know his work, and and he takes to you after a while, he warms up, and then he can be great. The time I went to his house was a prime example. You've got the advantage of being face to face, which always helps rather than on the phone. But by the end of it, I was lucky. It was about an hour and a half I talked to him. By the end, he was just fantastic.
Oh.
He really opened up and was really chatting. The passion's still there. You just got to get to it.
Yeah, I would say he's kind of grumpy in the same way that like William Friedkin was considered grumpy. I just think he just doesn't have a filter, and he's just like, if I don't like something, I'm just going to say I don't like it.
Which is great. I love that.
Yeah.
Because we now live in an age where, everyone is so media trained in Hollywood, and everyone says, working with everyone else is such a wonderful experience, and they, it's just such boring plastic answers. when you get someone like John Carpenter and he starts, slagging off Steven Spielberg or something, and or says I hated this film, it's great. It's really entertaining,
refreshing. Did he remember you after the first time?
He didn't, and I was actually a little bit offended because I know a lot of people talk to him, but when I met him, it was the second time. I talked to him on the phone first, and then when I met him at his house, at the end of a conversation, I was talking about some modern horror films I liked. This was in 2010. I did him for the Ward, and we were talking about modern horror films, and he actually said to me, you know what? He said, I'm a bit out of the loop. I don't watch as many modern horror movies as I should. He said, would you do me a massive favour? He said, can you pick about a dozen from the last few years that you think are really good and send them to me?
Wow.
He said, and I'll watch them.
Oh,
so
that's nice.
Luckily, which was lovely. So luckily, this was in the days where there was a bit more money in magazines, and my magazine Total Film sort of paid for the DVDs rather than me have to pay for them myself. But I chose about 12. And so it cost about, $150 or something. And I sent them to his house in LA. And then I never heard anything, never got anything back. And then in the end, I spoke to his agent or whatever it was. And I said, did John ever watch those movies? What did he think? He said, oh yeah, he did watch them. He thought they were all shit. and, or thought most of them were shit. He just didn't get on with them. And I was like, oh, okay. But I thought he may at least remember me because of that. But next time I interviewed him a few years later, I didn't actually bring that up and remind him, which probably would have jogged his memory. But he didn't recognise me. He wasn't like, oh, you're the guy who sent me No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Never mind.
There you go. It's John Carpenter. He's a god. He can do what he wants.
Yeah, he can do it.
Yeah. You can have you can say I hated The Substance, for example. You can say that. That's his opinion at the end of the day, and fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back. he is great. Yeah. Fair play to him.
Do you want the synopsis?
Yes. Yeah, sure. Obviously, look, everyone listening to this, you're going to know the story of The Thing, but Rhea's going to give you the synopsis, as is tradition on the show, of course.
It's tradition, yeah. So The Thing, a research team in Antarctica is hunted by a shape-shifting alien that assumes the appearance of its victims.
Yes. Now, I assume you must have seen, obviously, The Thing from Another World.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's an interesting film in comparison, because basically what Carpenter and the screenwriter of The Thing, Bill Lancaster, kind of what they've done is they've basically inverted a lot of what's in The Thing from Another World, because The Thing from Another World, basically, for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's based on the same short story as The Thing, which is Who Goes There by John Campbell Jr. And The Thing from Another World, it came out obviously in the time post-World War II, where there were a lot of films basically about, you can't trust communists. Communists are bad. Everyone must work together. And a lot of the main characters are soldiers. And it's very kind of patriotic. And the bad guy, obviously, look, the Thing is the bad guy, but the real bad guy is the scientist. Basically, you can't trust the scientists and all that type of stuff. So, look, it's good, but it's very of its time, I would say. Would you agree?
I do to a degree. I think it's one of the best films of that genre of the time. In the 1950s, you had a whole wave of, like you said, communists and atomic monsters and all of that, the Cold War. And a lot of them are pretty average. And then there's some absolute gems. And The Thing from Another World, for me, is one of the gems, along with stuff like Incredible Shrinking Man and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Them, the giant ant movie, is fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's definitely one of my favourites of that era. But it is of its time. It's also like The Thing is just a man in a monster suit. He's sort of barreling around, hammering at doors, going, "Rawr!" He looks a bit like Frankenstein's creature.
Yeah, there's the great line in it where one of the characters describes it as an intellectual carrot.
Yeah,
intellectual carrot.
Because it looks like a massive stick of celery, basically. And then, at the end, it's a man in a suit. But yeah.
Yeah, Boris Karloff crossed with a giant carrot. That's what it is.
Excellent. I haven't seen it yet, but I will do. I'm going to watch it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you must. It's good. It's very good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But I think what is different about this film is, instead of it being about people working together, it's very much the opposite. It's very much about kind of, you can't trust people. There's a lot of paranoia because it's obviously post the 70s. And it's essentially like can't trust anyone, essentially, which I thought was an interesting inversion.
It's just so clever, isn't it? How this like shape shifting means that it could be anyone, in that same sort of vein as like the modern, It Follows. It's like, that sort of thing where anyone could be it, and it's so highly intelligent that it can replicate, anybody or anything. And it must be quite triggering with the dogs in it for you, Jamie.
Yeah, it is that opening scene where the dog's being shot at as it runs through the snow.
Yeah.
And then when it obviously transforms into the Thing with all the whipping tendrils and stuff. But I mean, the original, what's interesting about the original is it was produced by Howard Hawks, and a lot of people feel he kind of ghost directed it as well. But, maybe it was Christian Nyby who gets the credit, or maybe Hawks. It certainly feels like it's got Hawks' fingerprints all over it. But I think that also explains why the original is so much about sort of professionals and soldiers doing their thing, because Howard Hawks was all about that sort of guys working together, and, in his westerns and stuff, it was always doing a good job and being one unit and, selfless, blah, blah, blah. Whereas, like you said, this one is very much, it's 12 beardy men stuck in Antarctica in this sort of outstation. And they're still very good at their jobs. They're there for a reason and they're very capable. But like you said, the kind of paranoia creeps in where the Thing could be any one of them. So they can't trust each other, and it can assimilate and kind of imitate. And much as this is a movie where I'm sure we'll talk about the special effects, which are groundbreaking and gloopy and incredible.
Yeah.
But as much as it is that movie, it's also a psychological horror movie that is contained and claustrophobic and just really scary about not being able to trust your neighbour.
Yeah. So many characters in this movie, and then the MVP, as always, is J&B whiskey. Like a lot of Giallo films.
Yeah, as soon as I saw J&B, I thought, yep, it's another one.
Yeah, here's another one, tick.
Yeah, because as you can probably imagine, talking about exploitation films, if you do, a lot of J&B whiskey turns up in these films from like the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, we watched many featuring J&B.
Kurt Russell down in a bottle of J&B against this chess computer.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Which is it's interesting that that's the only woman in the film. It's an uncredited Adrienne Barbeau, who was married to Carpenter at the time.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to sound like David Tennant, but there are no women in this film apart from that. So you do have, like Jamie said, sort of 12 beardy guys. Now, I don't think it's an issue that there are no women in the film. Like, I think Carpenter himself has basically said, like, it isn't really that realistic that there would be women working on this sort of research station. I mean, yeah.
I think it works.
At that time.
I think it works better with the paranoia and the sort of competitiveness that it is all men as well. Like, for me, it doesn't mean that the film's lacking because there's no women in it. Like, I think it's just apt for the environment because they're in the Antarctic. So, brutal conditions.
It's also, like Carpenter has said, it's one of his apocalyptic trilogy, that he counts this and Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness. He calls it his apocalyptic trilogy. And just on a sort of subconscious level, I think it adds to that feeling of this being the end of the earth, not having any women there, because, without women, there is no life. And I think you maybe don't think of that as you're watching the movie, but there's something apt about it being all these guys just dying out one by one, and all the sort of testosterone and male energy in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned obviously the dog right at the start.
Yes.
I mean, the dog acting in this, he's a very good dog actor.
Amazing.
Yeah. I think even like just the way that the dog, like, because I don't know, the expression on a dog's face doesn't really change that much, even compared to like the other like huskies, like when they're all like in the pen together, like he just, because I know the dog they used is like not entirely husky, it's like part wolf as well. So I don't know if that's something to it as well. But yeah, I thought that the dog was great.
Yeah, the dog was amazing.
Dog's amazing, called Jed. We should give him a shout out.
I'm sure he's long since passed on, unfortunately.
I'm sure he has. He's up there somewhere listening
dog
to
heaven,
us, I hope. But yeah, like you said, he was part wolf, and Carpenter actually said that he loved Jed very much because I don't know if it was a wolf in him or not, but he just didn't give a shit, that he was never distracted. So obviously those shots when he's walking down the passageways, Jed, and he's sort of looking around the corners and eyeing people suspiciously, going about his business. Carpenter's doing his usual thing of having, Panaglide camera following him and stalking him. And any other dog, they'd be distracted by it. You've got a film crew, you've got a few men holding this camera and huddled around, sort of walking past the dog, filming it, and they'd sort of look sideways at you and ruin the shot. But Jed just didn't give a shit. So he just stayed completely focused, walked along, didn't look at anyone. So Carpenter could just do it take after take with no imperfections. So he loved it.
What a hero.
Yeah, I have to say that shot, or that specific scene that you were talking about, is actually my favourite in the film. I get it's not going to be everyone's favourite because it's got no action, and that's sort of the point. But I kind of like how the camera moves and it's this empty room. And then the dog appears, and we're suspicious of the dog anyway, because this is about 15, 20 minutes into the film. And the dog just, I don't know, just something about just the framing and the way the camera is used in that shot. Yeah. It just works really well. And him going into a room and you don't know who's in the room.
Yeah.
I mean, we could speculate. It's not.
You can see a shadow.
Yeah.
Silhouette.
It's somewhere in there. I mean, films aren't meant to be solved like puzzles, I guess. But to me, that's either Blair or Palmer, I think, who's in the room, because they've got hair, so they're not bald. So. But anyway, just that shot and like the opening, like when the Norwegian in the helicopter is shooting at the dog, the widescreen, it just looks so great.
Yeah,
it's so great.
I think the split between the two languages, like the Norwegian creating, and they read through things, and when he jumps out of the helicopter and he's shouting and they can't understand what he's saying because it's all in Norwegian, just creates more paranoia. I think that's like amazing as well.
And apparently what he says in the Norwegian is he actually says the kind of whole situation, that if you can understand Norwegian, you'd know exactly what's going on, because when he starts shouting, he's saying, like, it's not a dog, it's an alien. And he actually says it all. But obviously, we don't know that.
Yeah.
So we spend the first sort of 20 minutes of a movie thinking, you know, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah. What is it about this dog?
Yeah.
Highly suspicious.
Why are they shooting at this lovely dog? What the hell?
Yeah. I mean, look, and as a screenwriter, it's like, what a hook. Because it's like, it's the perfect mystery, because it's like, well, what's going on? Why are they shooting at this dog? What's this dog done to deserve this? Where it's like, you know, it's now, no, obviously it's not really a dog.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, they could have shot the Norwegian guy in the leg just to kind of disarm him, but they didn't. They shot him in the head through the eye, so then he can't tell them anything. So, you know, if they'd done it the other way around, there just wouldn't be this film. The film wouldn't be the same, you know, so it's perfect, really.
Yeah, and another thing that I really like, again, it's like, I guess with any film, you could ask, like, okay, why is this film better than, like, other films of the same type, right? But, like, just the way that the blocking is used. So you'll have these shots where, bear in mind, there are 12 characters in this film. That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of characters.
And the first person doesn't die of those 12 until about, I don't know, nearly halfway into the film. So you'll have these shots where they're all there, and it's just how they're placed in the frame and the blocking. Like, there's some amazing blocking in this film. I know people talk about Spielberg. Oh, Spielberg's got, like, the best blocking, like, ever, which he does. But, like, and this goes to not just John Carpenter, but Dean Cundy as well, who's a cinematographer on this film. Like, just the way that the shots put together are just, it's just so good. I'm nerding out, basically, because, like, oh my God, like, it's great. And depth of field and things like that.
Carpenter and Cundy were absolute masters, I think. And all of those shots you're talking about, when they're all in the room talking and interacting, and the way it's presented and blocked, was all apparently done just kind of on the day. That Carpenter wasn't someone who storyboarded it. He just turned up and he'd have 12 hairy men in the room and just go, right, how are we going to shoot this? And he just instinctively did it in such a way that you really get a sense of all these characters as individuals and as a group and their dynamics. And to do that is really quite masterful. It's so hard to do.
Yeah, it's just so difficult to have 12 characters even, you know, that's crazy.
Yeah, especially when, like, at least 9 of them have got beards. It's like they're parkers, in their hoods.
Oh, I mean, with this having such a cult following these days, I find it really hard to believe that there was such negative reviews at the time.
Yes, you've preempted what I was going to say next. So for people who think, like, oh, critics don't know what they're talking about, you know, people, like, they just talk a lot of shit. I've picked one very specific review of The Thing, because for anyone who doesn't know, The Thing was very badly reviewed when it came out. It got horrendous reviews. It got absolutely shit on from all sides. So I've got a review by a guy called Vincent Canby from the New York Times. So this came out the same day that The Thing came out. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just to give you kind of a flavour as to kind of what it is. So it says as follows. So John Carpenter's The Thing is a foolish, depressing, overproduced movie that mixes horror and science fiction to make something that is as fun as neither one thing or the other. Sometimes it looks as if it aspired to be the quintessential moron movie of the 80s, a virtually storyless feature composed of lots of laboratory-concocted special effects, with the actors used merely as props to be hacked, slashed, disemboweled and decapitated, finally to be eaten and then regurgitated as, guess what, more laboratory-concocted special effects. There may be a metaphor for all this, but I doubt it. And then just to finish it off, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it says, The Thing, which opens today at the Rivoli, or the Rivoli, don't know how to say that, and other theatres, is too phony looking to be disgusting. It qualifies only as instant junk.
Well, little did this critic know that that was kind of the future of sci-fi horror and, like, blending genres, you know. Blending genres is the thing now.
I mean, that was pretty much a standard impression at the time. That was how it was greeted. And I think the thing you have to remember is a couple of months before The Thing, you had E.T. come out and make 700 million at the box office, and it's like friendly, lovable alien. And that's the movie people wanted to see. They didn't want nihilism. They didn't want despairing kind of disillusionment. They didn't want 12 beardy men going around, trudging around in the snow. They'd never had special effects like this before. That, we look at it now and think, oh, they're absolutely incredible. And I'm sure we'll go into more detail about them. But at the time, you'd had the chest bursting scene in Alien, which was quite quick. You'd had stuff like the werewolf transformations in American Werewolf in London and The Howling. But that was kind of as far as it went. And you'd never had anything that was this kind of extended and wild and gloopy and repulsive. And again, you didn't see that kind of thing in cinema then. And all the reviews were saying, like, why the fuck? They didn't use that language, but why the fuck do we need to see this?
Yeah.
They liked Halloween because it was all suggestion and shadows. And to them, that is what skillful movie making is and what skillful horror was, but it should be left to the imagination. So when they saw this stuff, rather than think it's incredible and celebrate Rob Bottin, the special effects maestro, they just thought it was repulsive, disgusting, unnecessary, tasteless. John Carpenter, one review called him a pornographer of violence.
Wow.
And this kind of horror was very much considered one step above pornography. So it's a different time. And we mentioned this earlier with the democratization of film criticism, but also back then when you just had a few outlets and the sort of people who wrote for them, they're usually very highly educated, a certain social class. They come at it with a certain taste. You could call it a sort of superiority or snobby if you want to.
Yeah.
So they're going to watch a movie like The Thing and they just thought it was horrible, disgusting, absolute shit. So if you put all of those elements together, you can see why it got absolutely trashed at the time.
Yeah.
Because we may be here now 40 years later and you can't understand it. You go, how the fuck could they have missed it? And, thought it was awful. But that is why. And also, like, Blade Runner came out in that period as well. Within 2 months of each other, you had E.T., Blade Runner, The Thing, 3 absolute classic science fiction films. And Blade Runner also got terrible reviews because it was depressing and because it was non-stop rain and people and it flopped at the box office like The Thing did because people didn't want that.
Yeah.
They wanted E.T.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
And I mean, getting more into the effects, like we keep referring to, the death count on this film is around 11. I mean, some of these, it's like the person dies and gets taken over by the thing, and then the thing gets killed later. So maybe it's probably more than 11. And I'm sure there's a few stray dead bodies at the beginning when they get to the site and things like that. But, I totaled around 11. So that's 11 opportunities for amazing special effects.
Yeah.
Any particular favourites that you want to mention?
Well, I think the sort of I love the near the start of a film with a dog turning inside out and all the tendrils whipping and just the fact you're so not expecting it at that moment. I remember seeing that when I was about, 14 when I first discovered the film on VHS. And it's such a what the fuck moment.
Yeah.
You'd never seen anything like it in cinema before.
Yeah.
But if you had to name one, the kind of standout centerpiece sequence is the scene with Norris, isn't it, on the table?
Yeah.
Where he's kind of getting out a defibrillator.
Yeah.
Because he sort of had a heart attack or something, and the doctor goes to do it on his chest, and his chest opens up, clamps down on the doctor's arms, sort of severs them at the elbows. And then the head of Norris kind of on the table stretches out, the neck stretches out, the head falls on the floor and sort of falls off, basically kind of gets decapitated. And then spider legs sprout out the head and it's kind of scuttles off, and then they hit it with a flamethrower. And it's just incredible. It just goes on. Every time you think it can't get any more wild and any more mad, it does. There's another bit to that sequence. And it's just masterful that you had Rob Bottin. He was the special effects guy, and he'd done The Howling. He was Rick Baker's protege. So Rick Baker had done, obviously, American Werewolf in London. He went off and did The Howling, and he worked with Carpenter, and they had a year to prep this movie. And Carpenter said to Rob Bottin, right, I want the thing to be a shapeshifter like it was in the original novella. It's not in the 1951 film. You go away, you design it, you come up with what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And Rob Bottin went away and he storyboarded those sequences, those set pieces, and he drew it, and it was just his imagination. So he let it go wild. Anything he could imagine, he put on the page. And he showed it to John Carpenter and said, here we go. And John Carpenter said, well, that looks fucking great, but can you do that? And he said, no, I can't. He's like, nobody can do that. It's never been done before, but I'm going to try. And then he went away and basically he worked 7-day weeks for a year. Rob Bottin, he was only 20.
Wow.
And he came up with these effects and he used bubblegum, rubber, wax, melted plastic, KY jelly, buckets and buckets of KY jelly, and he invented all this stuff. And when he finished working on the movie, he was so exhausted he was hospitalized.
My God,
that's what he put into it. And then he went on to his career that he worked on stuff like Total Recall and RoboCop, bigger budget films. But the thing for me is the absolute kind of high point of practical effects. I think you've got movies like The Fly, you've got movies like Society, you've got, there's quite a few movies, Hellraiser, but if you had to name one for me where this art form hit its kind of apex, it was The Thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about the effects is that they are practical. I appreciate they did nearly kill Rob Bottin. I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, like the thing about them is, they're tactile. They're happening in front of you. There's a weight to them. Like, that's what all the hard work is for.
Yeah.
So, and it just looks amazing. I mean, I don't really have a favorite because they're all great. The scariest to me is the dog transformation. So the first one that you've seen, because the dogs are upset and scared and that sort of,
adds to it. All the barking, they're going mental, aren't they?
Yeah.
And the sound that the thing makes as well is very kind of like unnerving.
Oh, it's very eerie. But then like when it gets to the peak of the film, when they go down into the generator room and the basement, like it's still just, amps it up like as much as possible. And it still surprises you that it just gets bigger and more terrifying at the end. And it's always shocking.
I think that's also why the film's so effective, that they shot it. They sort of went between two places. They did it in British Columbia, where they built the outstation, and then they left it for months until it got completely snowed in. Wow. And then they went back and filmed there. So it was really those conditions.
Wow.
And then when they did soundstage stuff back at Universal Studios in California, it's sound stages, but they refrigerated all the sets to make it, you've got the breath and stuff. So wherever they were filming, those guys were fucking freezing and they were there in place. And I just think that all comes through. Again, it's kind of, subconscious or subliminal, but it's there in the performances, and there's just something authentic about that film.
Yeah, it's really the frost in the beard. When you've got 12, hairy men, you get the frost in the body hair and in the beards, which looks very effective because you can see just exactly how cold they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, speaking, again, just talking about like the different sort of death scenes, what I like about the Norris kind of death scene is that it kind of comes a bit out of nowhere, so you're not really expecting it. Like, what they do in movies now is they would use the score to prepare people, and then it would be a sting, but there's nothing like that on there. And also it kind of happens, as I say, slightly out of nowhere, because of what's happening in the film, because they think McCready is the thing, and he's come back and he's basically trying to convince them, no, I'm not the thing. And it's like, you can't really trust this person or this person. And then Norris has this heart attack. And even though now obviously we know kind of what's going on, I think if you didn't know that was going to happen, that would scare the absolute shit out of you because it's like, oh fuck, like out of nowhere.
It's the misdirection of it all. Like it's the same in the blood testing sequence, that they're doing it one by one, and at some point, or you suspect at some point, the blood's going to react, and one of them's going to be the thing when they're putting the hot sort of copper wire in the blood. But again, it's just the timing. That each time, like you're tense, and then it just hisses and it's fine. The blood hisses and it's not infected. And then the one time you kind of relax, because the guys get slightly distracted and they sort of talk to each other and they're not really studying the Petri dish, is of course the time it leaps out. And it's just all misdirection and Carpenter knowing exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, because normally I think they said this in one of the behind the scenes kind of videos that I watched, that normally it's the third one. It's the rule of three, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the third person is Clark, who we've been told by Blair, it's like, you've got to watch out for Clark. Like, he was around the dog, right, for a long time. And then when he's not the Thing, and then it turns out that Palmer is the Thing, because Palmer is also the comic relief character, so you're maybe not expecting him to be the Thing.
Yeah.
Also, because they don't show any signs of being infected as well, they're just literally just going about their day. You have no idea that they've been taken over. That's also very, very effective. There's no, like, I don't know, twitchy stuff or anything like that.
No, nothing. It's not like Invasion of the Body Snatchers where they act differently, people. Well, but apparently, I was just going to say, apparently Carpenter and Kurt Russell used to talk about it all the time. They used to discuss, when you've been taken over by the Thing, so you are the Thing, do you know it? Is there a part of you that's still in there human and you're a host to this entity but you can't do anything about it? Or does it take you over to the point that you don't even know it, you just think you're yourself? And they couldn't agree on the answer.
That's more ambiguous that way. And speaking of ambiguous, this is a very ambiguous ending.
Yes.
So there's a few different interpretations on this. I think one is that some people thought that the whiskey that he hands over again, the J&B, that could have had petrol or fuel in it, so that he's going to, McCready's going to set Childs on fire. Right. Another interpretation is that it's just ambiguous. They're going to freeze to death and they're going to be completely paranoid and nobody wins. What did you take from it, Jamie, from the ending?
I don't think there's a definitive answer, but I get the sense that one of them is the Thing. If I had to put my money on it, I'd put it on Childs. And I think one of them, and they're both going to die there, or Childs is going to kill McCready if he is the Thing, and then freeze to death. And then whenever it is, weeks later, months later, when the rescue teams fly in, when the snow clears up a bit, the Thing is going to be frozen again, like at the start of the film. And it was still, it's waiting for its next chance and it will take over. I think it's the apocalyptic trilogy for a reason. And, we all know if it reaches civilization and begins to spread, and it's the end of days, because there's no stopping it.
Yeah. And there was that earlier discussion that they had about not sharing food or drink because it'd be contaminated, and he does accept the whiskey and he drinks from it.
Yeah,
which could infer that maybe he is the Thing.
Yeah, I think they both know. Whether they both are, or one of them is, or none of them is, I think both those guys know that they're not getting out of there anyway. If they're there's no camp left. They burnt it all. I think they're gonna freeze to death.
Yeah.
They may as well drink the fucking whiskey,
Yeah.
In a few hours, they're dead.
Yeah, I mean, it could be any of those. I mean, to me, it's kind of more messed up if neither of them is the Thing. Yeah. And they both kind of think the other one is. And like you said, they're going to freeze to death anyway.
Yeah.
So, it's a very, very bleak kind of ending if you kind of think of it in those terms, I guess.
Apparently they did shoot an alternative ending. Do you guys know this?
Yes. The editor had this idea to let's shoot like an upbeat ending where McCready gets rescued and then he does a test and then he's not the Thing. So it's like, hooray, we saved the day, which would have
saved the day.
Shit, quite frankly.
Oh, really?
Carpenter thankfully stood his ground and said, no, that goes against the whole movie. I want, the whole movie is downbeat and ambiguous and I want it to end like this.
Yeah.
Which again just didn't chime with the time. But if this movie had come out in the 70s when a lot of films were like that, that sort of took on the American culture of the time and all the problems, and a lot of the horror films then were downbeat and nihilistic and cynical, it maybe would have been a big hit in the 70s. But I think by 1982, people didn't want that.
Yeah, I feel very sorry for Carpenter because before The Thing, he'd released Halloween. That was very financially successful. The Fog was financially successful. Escape from New York was financially successful. He'd had 3 successes, one after the other. And The Thing was like, right, those were independently made films, and now you're making this film for Universal. So, you know, giving you like, you know, this huge budget, this is going to be right. This is you proving that like you're this great director that we think you are. And then, yeah, it bombed and critics hated it. Yeah, same thing happened with Big Trouble in Little China. I think a few other films after that as well, where he was just very, very unlucky, seemingly.
It's mad. There is a whole other world, a parallel career he could have had if the thing had done well. Because he'd kind of earned his spurs and he'd made these great little films that were successes. And this was his big studio movie. And if it had done well at the box office, he was off to the races. You know, he was already working on Firestarter, a big budget Stephen King adaptation. He was delighted with a script. He thought he had an amazing film ready to shoot. And then when the thing flopped, Universal fired him from Firestarter. Oh. And then he had a similar experience, a nightmare with a studio on Big Trouble in Little China. And then he had to go back to get his control back. He had to go back to making small independent films. You know, he made Prince of Darkness.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting to think, like, if the thing had caught the zeitgeist and had made hundreds of millions of dollars like it deserved to, what career would John Carpenter have had? Would he have been like another Steven Spielberg? Would he have been in the late 80s, been making, 80 million blockbusters or something? It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was some influence, whether it was just from the thing, but obviously, look, we mentioned like we had The Fly, The Blob, Invaders from Mars. So all these kind of other directors, like his contemporaries, like Cronenberg and Tobe Hooper, who are making remakes of their favorite like 50s horror films for the modern time. I even, brought up Independence Day earlier. I think the scenes in Independence Day where they're dissecting the alien, I think that comes from The Thing, to me. That's my opinion. But
it's a movie that really, became a part of popular culture. It just took its time. It was badly received, but it built up a following on VHS, and then gradually people came to it and celebrated it. And now, the last 10, 15 years, it's on every list of the greatest horror movies, greatest science fiction movies ever made.
Yeah.
But always be in the top 10. So I'm sure every filmmaker working today, if you're making anything in that kind of, ballpark, you're going to be influenced by it.
Yeah.
It's out there in the DNA.